Imagine a place where mountains rise like cathedral walls, where a lake glimmers like polished glass, and where every stone seems to guard a secret, a place where past and present blend so naturally that time feels suspended. This is Lucerne, the heart of Switzerland, a city wrapped in legend, beauty, and history. But Lucerne was not always the postcard perfect destination we know today. No, its roots dig far back into the Middle Ages, into a time of monks, merchants, and deep uncertainty. Our story begins around the 8th century, when a small Benedictine monastery stood on the shores of what we now call Lake Lucerne. There was no bustling city here, only silence, forests, and water. The monastery, dedicated to Saint Leodegar, became the spark around which life slowly gathered. Travelers crossing the Alps stopped here for shelter. Fishermen cast their nets into the lake. Families built their first wooden homes along the River Reuss. By the 12th and 13th centuries, trade routes through the Alps began to flourish, especially the newly opened St. Gotthard Pass, the fastest path between northern and southern Europe. Suddenly, Lucerne became a gateway, a crossroads, a powerful trading center. Goods from Italy, Germany, and France poured through its markets, and the once quiet settlement rapidly grew into a thriving town. But with wealth came ambition and conflict. For many years, Lucerne was under the influence of the mighty Habsburgs, rulers whose power stretched across Europe. Yet the people of Lucerne felt the winds of change. They saw nearby regions joining a new alliance, the Swiss Confederation, and dreamed of freedom. So, on a decisive day in 1332, Lucerne made its choice. It joined the original forest cantons, Uri, Schwyz, and Unterwalden, becoming the first city to enter the young confederation. This was a bold act of rebellion. The Habsburgs did not forgive easily. War erupted, alliances clashed, and the future of Lucerne trembled. But the city stood firm. Victories like the Battle of Sempach in 1386, where Swiss forces defeated a powerful Habsburg army, changed history forever. Lucerne was now unstoppable, a rising star of the Confederation. The city flourished. Stone walls rose to protect it. Towers pierced the sky. Bridges arched across the Reuss. Among them was the Kapellbrücke, the chapel bridge, built around 1333, now the oldest surviving wooden-covered bridge in Europe. It was more than a bridge. It was a gallery, its wooden rafters filled with painted panels telling the story of the city in symbols and legends. Even today, walking across it feels like stepping back through time. And then came the Musseg Wall, with its 9 watchtowers stretching like a crown along the hillside, guarding Lucerne for centuries, each tower with its own story. But the most haunting chapter arrived much later, in the 19th century, when Europe watched the tragedy of Swiss soldiers fighting in foreign wars. To honor their sacrifice, sculptor Thorvaldsen carved the Lion Monument, a dying lion pierced by a spear, resting on broken shields. Mark Twain called it the saddest and most moving piece of stone in the world. Stand before it, and the silence is overwhelming, a reminder that even in peace there is pain beneath the surface. I'm a huge fan of history, and I love exploring stories from every corner of the world. If you enjoy this kind of content, feel free to like, subscribe, and drop a comment if you have any questions or suggestions. Thanks so much for being here. By then, the world had begun to discover Lucerne. Poets, painters, and travelers crossed oceans to witness its beauty. The arrival of railways in the 1850s transformed the city into a gateway for tourism. Palaces and grand hotels were built along the lake. Steamships glided across the water, carrying curious explorers to the foot of Mount Rigi and Mount Pilatus, where legends spoke of dragons living deep within the mountain caverns, and the legends continued to grow. In the 20th century, Lucerne became a cultural beacon, the home of festivals, music, and art. Today, the Kultur- und Kongresszentrum Luzern, KKL, with its iconic architecture, stands as a symbol of modern creativity, while the old town preserves the charm of painted facades and cobblestone streets. Lucerne has survived fires, wars, invasions, and centuries of change. Yet it remains timeless, a city where every bridge tells a story, every tower watches history, and every ripple in the lake reflects 1,000 years of memory. So when you walk along the Reuss at sunset, when church bells echo through narrow alleys, when the mountains turn gold in the fading light, remember this: Lucerne was born from faith, built by merchants, strengthened by rebellion, scarred by loss, and reborn as a jewel of culture and peace, a city that started as a monastery and became the beating heart of Switzerland, a city where history breathes, where legends whisper, and where time itself seems to pause, if only for a moment.